Welcome back. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Retail Horror Stories. Hit the like button and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That way, YouTube knows to keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. It was a slow afternoon at Target, the kind where guest services becomes the catch-all for odd returns and customer questions. The red counters gleamed under fluorescent lights, the steady rhythm of scanners filling the quiet. Most of the returns were predictable. Shirts that didn't fit, toys missing pieces, or appliances people swore had never been opened. Around 3 o'clock, a couple pushed up a large, clear storage bin wedged in their cart. The man said it was defective, that the lid wouldn't close properly. His tone was casual, the way people talk when they're slightly annoyed but expect a quick fix. His partner nodded and held out a receipt. The bin looked ordinary, one of those oversized totes families buy during seasonal sales. The blue snap lid hung loosely, which matched their complaint. The guest services employee, already in routine mode, popped open one latch. She tilted the lid to check for warping in the seam. At first, she thought she saw a piece of lint or a stray string stuck in the groove. Then it twitched. A shiny, black body slipped out from under the lid. Its spindly legs clung to the edge before scuttling down toward the counter. Another appeared, and then 3 more, as though the plastic seam had split into a nest. The red hourglass on one abdomen glared under the overhead lights. The employee froze. A customer behind the couple gasped and backed away, bumping her cart into a display of gift bags. The man returning the bin muttered, "What the hell?" as more spiders crawled onto the stainless surface. Acting on instinct, the employee shoved the lid closed and slid the entire bin away from her. A black widow darted onto the counter and toward her arm before dropping back inside. She grabbed an empty tote from under the desk and slammed it over the return, trapping everything underneath. "Can you call a manager now?" she told the couple, voice trembling but steady enough to pass for control. Within moments, the front-end manager hurried over. The employee lifted the tote's corner just enough for her to see the glossy bodies writhing against the clear bin. The manager didn't flinch. She simply nodded and pulled out red tape. Together, they sealed the tote to the counter and paged asset protection. While they waited, the couple apologized over and over. They claimed they had no idea the bin was full of spiders, that they'd just noticed it wouldn't shut. The employee wanted to believe them, but her skin crawled with the memory of that first spider moving toward her wrist. Asset protection arrived with cones and a rolling cart. Carefully, they lifted the taped tote and wheeled it into the back room. Every bump along the tile made faint tapping noises from inside, like claws on plastic. By now, word had spread. Guests whispered near the registers, asking if something dangerous had happened. Associates in seasonal reported finding fine webs stretched across other bins on the shelf. One worker spotted what looked like an egg sac clinging under a lid. Pest control was called immediately. While they made their way over, the manager printed an incident form and asked the shaken employee to sit down. She filled in the details with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. Date, time, return, type, description. Multiple live spiders inside storage bin. Appeared to be black widows. When pest control arrived, the technician confirmed it. Latrodectus hesperus, he said, matter-of-factly. Western black widow. They like tight, undisturbed spaces. Shipping containers are perfect. He vacuumed up the spiders with a long nozzle and sealed the egg sacs in a jar. His calm professionalism steadied the team, but his words left a chill. "If you've sold any of these bins already, check with corporate." Families could have taken them home. The store immediately pulled every bin from the sales floor. 9 had been sold earlier that morning. Without a recall order, there was no way to contact the customers directly. Instead, the store posted a sign at guest services. "If you purchased a 106-quart storage bin on date, please return it unopened for a free exchange." The message was deliberately vague, but everyone behind the counter knew the real reason. Later that evening, a mother and her young son came in carrying one of the bins. She said she'd seen something moving inside. When the lid was opened with extreme caution, another black widow clung to the corner, still alive. Her son proudly handed over a small jar with holes punched in the lid. Inside, another spider twitched weakly against the glass. In marker across the metal lid, he had written, "Danger bug." Pest control did a full sweep of the receiving area, stockroom, and seasonal aisles. Sticky traps and sprays were placed overnight, and a handful of stragglers were caught the next morning. The situation was resolved, but the unease lingered. For weeks, the employee who first opened the bin checked every return with an almost obsessive caution. She couldn't handle storage bins without imagining legs crawling beneath the plastic rim. Even when she knew it was clean, she felt phantom tingles on her arms. The incident never made the news, and corporate downplayed it in emails. But among employees, it became one of those whispered Target horror stories you tell new hires during slow nights. A reminder that in retail, even the most ordinary return can turn into something you'll never forget. Openers say the first hour at Target feels like a blank page. Lights warming up, floor scrubber humming, Starbucks steaming into the quiet. That morning, the page was already marked. 3 gray feathers clung to condensation on the sliding doors. Hannah noticed them, frowned, and stepped inside. The sound carried from seasonal before she reached the registers. A rattling thrum of wings against metal, squeals, the brittle pop of plastic. She radioed without stopping. "Manager to seasonal, please. We've got birds." Bird usually means one sparrow that rode in on a cart. In seasonal, there were dozens. Starlings and pigeons wheeled under the fluorescents, banking off aisle signs, skimming over patio sets. They weren't trying for the exits. They flew at the brightest parts of the ceiling, like the light itself was a magnet. Joe, the opening manager, took one look and keyed the intercom. "Attention team, we're delaying opening. Please remain at your work areas." He locked the front doors and propped the garden ones wide to a square of pale morning. Asset protection arrived with cones and caution tape, trying to build a funnel from seasonal to garden. The birds ignored the geometry, surfing above it in tight, frantic orbits. A pigeon clipped a light fixture. The plastic lens cracked, and glittering dust fell across a stack of lanterns. Hannah pulled the display out of the fall zone, hands shaking. "Where'd they all come from?" Derek from overnight asked, staring up. He swore the back door had stayed locked. Garden gates were chained. The cameras showed motion at 2:07 a.m. Flicker, then blur, but no clear entry. It felt like the birds had generated inside the building. Pest control rolled in with nets and long poles. "Lights down help," the lead tech said. Joe dimmed 2 zones. In the softer light, the flock dipped lower, startled by their reflections in the window glass. The techs worked methodically, lift, steer, release. Each time a net bagged one, they carried it through garden and tossed it up, and the bird vanished into a slice of sky. Progress was slow. Meanwhile, cleanup began because contamination doesn't wait. Facilities staged yellow biohazard buckets. Anything edible within range of droppings got pulled and tossed. The aisle looked like a storm had threaded it. Feathers stuck to peg hooks, seed freckling the tile from a torn pallet, discount tags fluttering where wings had brushed them. Hannah nudged a cart toward a sparrow that had landed on a shelf lip, dazed. It hopped onto the red plastic like a commuter choosing a seat. 2 techs raised nets to form a corridor, and she rolled the cart toward the garden door. For a few seconds, the store went quiet enough to hear the little breaths the bird took. Then it launched, shot between the nets, and was gone. They closed the store for hours. Guests still pressed faces to the glass, reading the printout on the vestibule, temporarily closed for maintenance. And a few knocked, mouthing, "Seriously?" as if an argument could negotiate open air for trapped birds. By late morning, they had the count under 10. 3 had tucked themselves along a beam above home storage where nets couldn't reach. "Kill the lights," the tech said, and Joe did. The fluorescence went down by quadrant until only emergency bars glowed. In the dim, the birds loosened their grip, bodies collapsing into rest. The tech nudged them with the pole, patient as a minute hand. One by one, they drifted toward the only bright square left, the open garden door, and slipped outside. Then came the part no one sees in the short version. Everything the birds touched had to be cleaned or thrown away. End caps were stripped. Candy near seasonal was bagged as waste. Maintenance swapped 2 shattered light lenses. A P pulled footage and found what Derek had described: sensor trips, video static, and frames that seemed to breathe. Nothing you could send to district as proof of anything except mess. When pest control declared the building clear, they walked the perimeter and found a likelier story than magic. The night wind had rocked the loading dock door just enough to leave a sliver, and a vendor pallet of wild bird mix staged for an end cap, its shrink-wrap clawed, had scented the air. Once a few birds got in, the lights did the rest. Fluorescents confuse migratory patterns. Bright rectangles become false horizons. It was science, not a curse. Knowing didn't make it feel less eerie. They reopened the next morning. The store smelled faintly of disinfectant. Seasonal had gaps where product hadn't been reflowed yet. If you were a guest, you'd think nothing of it. The team knew. They added a new ritual to opening. A glance at the vestibule glass for feathers, a check of the dock seals, a second listen before flipping all the lights on at once. For weeks, evidence turned up like echoes. 1 gray feather stuck in the seam of an LED price sign. A fine scratch along a plastic aisle marker at wing height. A single seed under a gondola nobody had moved. Hannah started hearing wings when the air kicked on, the way the mind reuses sounds it doesn't want to be surprised by again. Joe filed the incident report and got the expected reply: document, sanitize, monitor. Corporate's line was simple: pest event resolved, and the email disappeared under planogram updates. But inside the store, the story lodged like grit. New hires heard it on slow nights. Close the garden doors, someone would say, by way of a punchline. Or the sky comes in. One afternoon, weeks later, a guest at Starbucks asked why the seasonal aisle looked so neat, like it had been reset that morning. Hannah laughed and said, "We had a reason to get good at it." She didn't explain, she didn't mention the moment in the dim when the last 3 birds turned toward the only light and made the right choice, or the way the store felt enormous when the noise finally stopped. The part that sticks isn't the mess. It's the way a building designed for control surrendered it in under a minute. Automatic doors that keep the outside outside, lights meant to clarify, aisles meant to guide. None of it matters to a panicked animal brain aimed at brightness. It makes you look at the ceiling differently. It makes you think about all the false horizons you've built for yourself and how easy it is to fly at them until you're exhausted. On her last week before transferring, Hannah opened with Joe one more time. No feathers on the glass, no stray seeds, just the scrubber's citrus trail and the soft inhale of the HVAC. "Ready?" Joe asked. "Yeah," she said, and flipped the switches. The store brightened in a wave. For a second, she braced for the thrum she could still hear at the edge of memory. Nothing came but ordinary morning noises. Cartwheels, scanner beeps, milk steaming at Starbucks. The blank page again. She let it stay blank and walked the racetrack once, eyes up, just to make sure. Closing at Target runs on muscle memory. Dim the zones, face the shelves, count the drawers, lock the cases. By 8:45, the store was mostly quiet. Starbucks rinsing pitchers, the floor scrubber tracing the racetrack. Last guests drifting toward registers under the 10 minutes to close announcement. Marisol led electronics that night. She'd finished the count and was turning toward the iPhone cage, the 2-key one, hers, and asset protections, when two men slid in from the racetrack. Hoodies up, masks that weren't about health. The shorter one carried an empty backpack. The taller kept both hands buried in his sweatshirt pocket. Training says, greet to reduce unknowns. "Looking for something before we close?" she asked. "Phones," Tall said. "The good ones." "The case is closed for the night," she said steady. "We can schedule pickup tomorrow." Short yanked at a demo phone. The tether whined and held. He yanked again. The mount cracked, but the fake stayed. He slapped the display, annoyed. "Those are dummies," Marisol said. "Live inventory stays locked." "Open the cage," Tall said, rocking on his heels. He nodded toward the steel cabinet. "I don't have the second key," she said, which was true, and also the only answer she could give. "Time lock's on. Call whoever has it." Her Zebra buzzed from the front. "Last guests clearing. Hold positions." She thumbed back. Possible E-Rob, 2 males. In the office, Sydney from Asset Protection watched the monitors, saw the angles, the way Tall stood between Marisol and the aisle. Sydney hit the panic macro, silent alarm to 911, internal page to leadership, then spoke into Marisol's ear. "Police en route. Keep distance." The floor scrubber rounded the end cap. The operator clocked the posture of the two men and backed away. The hum receded, and the store felt suddenly cavernous. Short swung the backpack into a headphone display. Boxes toppled. He vaulted the counter and checked the register. Empty. Closers do that first. Coins rolled. He grabbed a few cheap earbuds and stuffed them into the bag, the kind of loot you take when the plan is falling apart. Tall stepped back to control the space, and his heel found cleaner where the scrubber had passed. He slipped, dropped to one knee, shoulder tapping a Plex guard with a dull thunk. Marisol's hands twitched to steady him, then stopped. "Training. Don't touch, don't provoke, keep your hands visible." "Let's not make this complicated," he said through teeth. "Open the cage." "It won't open," she said, pointing to the cage's dark LED. She didn't mention overrides. She didn't know and wasn't going to try. From the ceiling speakers, Joe's voice came calm on purpose. "Attention team, we are now closed for the evening. Please bring all items to the front lanes." Same line as always, delivered to an empty floor. A reminder there were eyes beyond the aisle. Short popped back over the counter, chest heaving. "Man, this place is dead," he muttered. "They're moving," Sydney whispered. "Hold." The two fast-walked toward soft lines cut right for the vestibule. The EAS gates sang when the backpack crossed, shrill, layered. It didn't matter. By the time the echo settled, they were already through the doors and into night. No one chased, that's policy, and also common sense. Police arrived in minutes that felt long. They took statements, pulled camera clips, asked for details that never satisfy. Height with shoes, eye color between mask and hood, any marks. Marisol realized she could describe Tall's shoes exactly. Black, worn heel edge, white scuff on the toe, but not his eyes. She'd been watching his hands. After they cleared, the store staged normal. Boxes upright, coins gathered, pegs refaced. Sydney printed the robbery policy and taped it inside the cabinet, though everyone could quote it. In the break room, someone blue-taped a hand-lettered sign by the clock. "Be kind. Comply. Observe. Go home." People joked, then touched it like a doorframe for luck. A P called back. The getaway SUV had plates stolen from a town 30 miles west. No hits yet. The report would roll up, become a bullet under organized retail crime, and the recommendations would sound like things they already did. Lock earlier, walk the racetrack in pairs, greet everyone. The part that stuck wasn't the almost, it was the after. Air got thinner around 8:45 for a few weeks. Headset chatter dropped to whispers. Marisol started placing the wet floor sign at a wider angle, as if geometry could change fate. The dad from Soundbars came back and said, "Saw cops, everything okay?" She said, "We had an incident," which was both true and all he needed. She didn't quit. She worked the next night and the night after. She learned her heart could sprint and then slow. She learned fear doesn't mean can't, it means careful. She walked to her car with a co-worker, kept her keys between fingers without making a fist, breathed when the doors hesitated like they do in winter. On her first day off, she returned as a guest. Habit pulled her to electronics. Ordinary again, a kid tapping a demo tablet. A couple comparing streaming sticks. The iPhone cage under its sleepy green LED. She bought AA batteries, cable ties, and, because it made her smile, a novelty mini wet floor triangle from the dollar section. At home, she set it by the door. It looked ridiculous, and it helped anyway. Weeks later, police called to say a store across town had a similar attempt. Same masks, same backpack, same SUV vanishing. No injuries there either. The pattern lifted the hairs on her arm and let her breathe easier. It wasn't personal. It wasn't about her aisle. It was weather passing through, and weather you prepare for is less frightening than weather you pretend isn't coming. Closing found its rhythm again. They still dimmed zones and nested carts and let the scrubber hum. The routine just had a new seam. Electronics locked 10 minutes earlier. A second walkthrough of the racetrack before the PA line. Some nights, when she keyed the mic and said, "We'll be closing in 10 minutes," she felt the words carry a different weight. The same sentence had once meant, "There are more eyes than you think, and help is already moving." People think horror is sirens and gore. Most nights it's smaller, a slick tile you don't see until you're on it, a cage that stays shut, a voice that keeps even when your hands shake, and the simple knowledge that you don't have to be heroic to get everyone home. You keep your hands visible, your voice low, and your feet under you. Overnights at Target have their own weather. The vents speak louder, the building clicks and settles, and every small noise travels like it's looking for company. Louise liked that. Inventory nights meant simple work: scan, stack, wrap, repeat, until a radio call broke the rhythm just after 1:30 a.m. "Camera keeps cutting out in garden," Asset Protection said. "Can you check?" He keyed through the side door into the outdoor garden center. Pallets of mulch and potting soil sat chest high. He heard it before he saw it. A dry tearing, like someone opening a stubborn bag. His flashlight found the spill, a 50-pound bag sliced at the corner, seed pouring in a glittering fan. A gray shape hunched at the seam, hands working like a mechanic's. Not a cat. The mask gave it away. Black fur around the eyes, ringed tail twitching. The raccoon blinked in the light, unbothered. A second head popped up from inside the torn bag, then a third behind the pallet. "Garden's got raccoons," he said into the radio, keeping his voice even. "At least 3. "Copy," the manager answered. "Do not engage." "I'm calling animal control." Luis backed to the service door and wedged it open, an exit he could reach without looking. He rolled a low gondola to block the aisle leading to the store. The raccoons didn't care. Seed kept pouring with the steady, nerve-prickling sound of dry rain. A fourth waddled from shadow, stood upright for a second. Balance, he told himself, and watched him. In the beam, its eyes reflected white, certain. It dropped to all fours and trundled closer, chittering in a register that translated in his ribs. "Status?" crackled the radio. "4 visible," he said. "One's approaching." "I'm elevated." He stepped onto a low rack and widened the beam. Sydney, from Asset Protection, arrived with a long push broom. "Barrier only," she said. Together, they angled 2 gondolas to make a V toward the far corner. It worked for 10 seconds, until the upright raccoon threaded between them, close enough for Luis to smell leaf mold on its fur. He did not kick. He did not shout. He let it pass. More eyes set like marbles along the fence line. 5, then 6. The room's math changed. They didn't swarm, they simply were. One worked a wire tie with delicate insistence. Another tugged at a bag of potting mix like it understood pull versus push. Sydney clapped once, sharp. They looked, unimpressed, and went back to eating. Animal control came through the service door calm and gloved, carrying collapsible cages and a bag that smelled aggressively of fish. "Evening," the officer said. "We'll bait and wait." Don't chase. They choose the easy food. Raccoons are clever and unembarrassed. The first 2 tested cages from the outside, slid small hands through bars to scoop bait without stepping on trigger plates, and chittered when the doors stayed open. The officer adjusted sensitivity, set more traps, and dimmed one bank of lights. In the softer glow, the animals relaxed. They caught the first within 20 minutes. The door dropped with a clean clack. The raccoon turned in a tight circle, huffing. The others watched, weighed the trade-offs, and kept eating. It was their pantry until it wasn't. While the officer worked, the radio filled with small tasks. Facilities staged biohazard buckets for the mess to come. The manager posted a temporarily closed for maintenance sign on the outer gate. A P pulled the store's main doors and walked the racetrack, just in case one curious animal found a gap. "Why tonight?" Sydney asked, low. "Wind," the officer said. "Scent carries." Shrink wrap, tears. If you stock seed at the same time every week, you're ringing a dinner bell, they learn. Luis kept to his rack. The upright raccoon sat below him like a patient with a number, placing one hand against the metal as if counting bars. Up close, he saw a notch in one ear and old white scars along its forearm. It looked up when he moved the beam and did not blink. 2 more cages snapped shut by the hour mark. A 4th took patience, the officer whispering encouragement to a creature that did not care about tone. The upright one refused every bait like it had principles. It would not step into a box. "Sometimes there's a captain," the officer said without mockery. He set a final trap beside the torn seed bag, smeared bait on the plate, and stepped back. The upright raccoon slid forward in a straight line, paused at the threshold like someone checking a dark basement, and placed one hand on the trigger. The door fell. It made a tight sound, then settled, breathing hard. Luis felt relief hit like heat. They loaded the cages onto the truck, bound for relocation miles away. As he worked, the officer gave the talk wildlife people carry. Rabies vectors, why you never grab. How winning against an animal that doesn't know it's in a contest is a good way to end a shift in the ER. He complimented the team for distance and barriers. "Smart beats brave every time," he said. When the last cage left, the garden center sounded suddenly huge. The seeds still streamed. They taped the torn bags for vendor credit, swept until piles formed, shoveled until the concrete reappeared, then hosed and squeegeed water toward the drain. The bait smell surrendered to bleach, then back to cold metal and dirt. On the way in, Luis paused at the chain link and looked up. The sky inside the grid looked like graph paper. He thought about lines, doors propped just enough, routines done at the same minute, schedules other creatures learn. He thought about how thin the barrier is between inside and outside at 2 a.m. He slept badly that day. In his dream, small hands, not paws, slid under doors and lifted latches with patient clicks. He woke with the knowledge that most things aren't out to hurt you or help you. They just are. Your job is distance and design. On his next shift, he stacked quarters on the door wedge so it wouldn't kick loose, checked the fence for gaps, and felt the tarp over the grills for wind creep. "Garden secure," he told the radio, and meant for now. The store learned rituals. Seed stayed inside until morning. Outdoor cameras got a firmware update. A sign went eye level by the service door. Door shut. Gate locked. Bait nothing. It looked like a joke until you'd heard a bag tear in the dark and felt a gaze evaluate you like a solvable problem. Word didn't make the news. It became a story told to new overnighters. The night the raccoons treated Garden like a pantry, and the team didn't try to be brave, just smart. People think horror is teeth and blood. Some nights it's 2 reflective eyes doing math about your distance. Some nights it's understanding you're not the only one with a schedule. After that, Luis still liked the city after hours feeling. He just added a rule. A city has other citizens. Respect their hours. Build your barriers. Keep your hands where they can see them. Saturdays at Target feel like a parade. Kids orbiting the racetrack, parents negotiating, carts squeaking a beat. Ellie pulled Toy Zone, face the Legos, tidy the dollhouse aisle, keep the demo keyboards from looping the same song. Around noon, a woman waved her over, cheeks flushed from chasing a toddler. "Something's moving in that box," she whispered, pointing to a big pink dollhouse on the middle shelf. "Like, actually moving." Ellie gave the gentle smile retail teaches you. Sometimes the cardboard flexes. She lifted the box. The shrink wrap was tight. When she pressed a dented corner, the dent pushed back, not a springy rebound, but a slow, intentional resistance. Her stomach dipped. She set the box on the floor, turned the seam away from the child, and slid a cutter under the tape. "Could be a battery demo," she said, though sealed units shouldn't have one. She eased the flap and peeled back tissue. A tarantula uncurled like a fist opening. Tan hairs bristled. Black feet placed themselves with quiet certainty. It crested the cardboard and stepped onto the white tile as if the aisle had been built for it. The toddler shouted, "Fuzzy!" and leaned in. Ellie raised a hand, voice calm over buzzing nerves. "Back for me, okay?" She used the empty box like a shield, lowering it in the spider's path. The tarantula paused, tapped the cardboard with 2 forelegs, and turned. Her radio crackled. "Everything good in toys?" "Need AP," she said, keeping it even. "Live animal, large." Sydney, from Asset Protection, arrived with a clear storage tote, the shoebox size. "We do not touch," she murmured. Together they guided the spider with cardboard and patience, herding it into the tote set on its side. When it walked in, Sydney tipped it upright and slid a clipboard over the top. "Contained." The store manager jogged up. "Where from?" "The box," Ellie said, pointing. "Inside, there's packing tissue, and this." She lifted a papery bundle from the liner, folded like a brittle flower. "Exoskeleton," Sydney said. "It molted in there." They taped the tote and rolled it to a locked bay in the stockroom. The tarantula pressed its legs along the clear wall, curious, not frantic. Pest control was called. The operator promised a rapid response and told them not to feed, spray, or jostle. "Keep it isolated and calm," he said, "and send the SKU. We'll want the pallet count." Back in toys, Ellie and Sydney checked boxes, palms flat, listening for the thud of loose parts versus the soft drag of something alive. A few rattled. Inside were only unbagged furniture pieces. One more exoskeleton turned up under a price rail. The spider hadn't just arrived. It had lived long enough to outgrow itself. Pest control rolled in with a calm that helped. The tech, crouched by the tote, smiled like he'd found a familiar neighbor and identified it after a look. "A phonopelma," he said, "one of the North American desert tarantulas. Not something you let crawl on guests, but not the danger most people imagine." He transferred it into a vented container with practiced hands, then taped the aisle and climbed a step stool with a flashlight. 2 faint silk lines crossed between boxes, a wad of silk tucked under a rail. The manifest said the dollhouses arrived 2 days earlier, routed through a coastal port. Either the spider rode the shipping container or hopped at a distribution center. The tech recommended quarantining the entire pallet and any adjacent SKUs on the same bill of lading. Facilities staged carts and biohazard buckets for a sanitation sweep. Sydney printed a simple sign for the end cap. Temporarily closed for inspection. Most guests accepted it. A few groaned, asking if all that was really necessary for a spider. Ellie looked at the empty spot where it had stood and nodded. "Yes?" District wanted clean chain of custody and calm language. Corporate's note said to avoid species ID and guest-facing messages and to focus on steps: containment, inspection, vendor coordination. no recall without more evidence, but a notice at guest services offered exchanges for unopened dollhouses bought that week. The manager taped careful postings by the returns desk and on the community board. Word moved through the team like water down a ramp. Headset whispers, backroom texts, a cartoon spider on the break room whiteboard. "Do not name it," Sydney wrote under the doodle. "It leaves with pest control." Even with the humor, the vibe shifted. Ellie found herself crouching to eye level with sealed boxes, listening before lifting, like tuning a radio. By mid-afternoon, the tech cleared the aisle. No additional spiders, just the one and its ghosted shell. He offered to coordinate transfer to a local nature center if the vendor didn't assert custody. "They're good animals," he said, sealing the container. Slow, deliberate. Ordinary returned in steps. A teen asked about headsets. A kid hammered a demo keyboard until the batteries bounced free. Ellie answered, restocked, and felt the adrenaline slide into the kind of tired that makes your hands miss the same peg twice. On break, she sat by receiving, replaying the image of the tarantula tapping cardboard before choosing a path. Nothing malicious, just an animal testing its world. Internally, it became a procedure wrapped in a story. Don't open questionable packages in guest view. Use totes to contain. Call AP first, then pest control. Log SKU and lot. Save any exoskeleton for vendor. Post the sign. Be calm. A week later, a man brought back an unopened dollhouse from the incident day. "My wife saw a Facebook post," he said sheepish. "We didn't even open it." Ellie processed the exchange and kept her voice even. "Thanks for bringing it in. We're inspecting related product." He asked if it was true about a spider in a box. She thought of the kid who'd said fuzzy, of the animal moving like a careful clock. Tick, place, tick. "We found something that didn't belong," she said. That was enough. After that, Ellie added a private ritual to Toy Zone. Before facing an aisle, she ran her palm lightly along the shelf edge, feeling for the subtle give of unsecured parts. She kept a flat of empty totes nested at the end cap, and a folded sheet of cardboard behind the price gun holster. Most days, it was just habit with nothing to show. That was the point. On her last shift before vacation, she noticed a single tan hair caught in the tape seam of a returned box, probably from a coat, maybe a dog. It flashed and pulled her heart into her throat before she let it go. She smiled at herself and at the shelf. The world is noisy. Not every brush against it means danger. People think horror is always sharp, but sometimes it's slow. Hours under fluorescent lights learning a new shape of caution, the realization that shipments carry stories, and one might crawl out and test your reflexes. Ellie still likes Toy Zone. She just opens boxes with the respect you give anything that could be alive, because once one was. That was enough to change the way she listens. Remodel weeks make Target feel like a half-finished map. Aisles shift 3 feet, gondolas sit bare, plastic sheeting turns corners cloudy. We worked nights to keep guests away from dust. By 2:15 a.m., the rhythm was set. Contractors on ladders swapping ceiling tiles, our team scanning fixtures, asset protection walking loops with calm voices on the radio. That's when the sound started. Scratch, pause, scratch, above aisle D12. HVAC can make that noise, but this crossed the aisle. Footsteps. Human weight sounds different. You know it without learning it. "A P to remodel," Sydney said over headset. Motion sensor just flagged D12 ceiling. Anyone up there? Negative, said Jorge, the contractor lead. My guys are in D9 and vestibule. I was zoning labels when a tile flexed. White dust sifted onto my scanner. The edge bowed like someone set a knee on it, and a clipped whisper dropped through, "Hold on." The panel gave way. A sneaker punched through. Then a teenage boy came down with the tile, arms pinned, landing on a stack of flattened cartons we'd staged for recycle. He groaned, rolled to hands and knees, and froze. Training gives you a pocket for shock. "Are you hurt?" I asked, then keyed my mic. "We have a fall." D12. Unknown. Juvenile, conscious and breathing. He looked 16 or 17. Hoodie dusted white, eyes wide but focused. He lifted empty hands. "I'm sorry," he said, voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to." He coughed, tile grit on his tongue. Joe, the opening manager, arrived at a jog with a first aid kit. "Hey, buddy," he said soft. "Let's sit." He guided him to a pallet. "Any sharp pain? Head? Neck?" The boy shook his head too fast. "I'm okay. I just slipped. I've been careful." His hands fluttered like birds that couldn't land. Asset protection set cones and hung plastic to screen the aisle. Someone cut the music. Buildings get quiet when they're listening. We radioed 911 for a welfare check and medical eval. While we waited, the contractors set a ladder and peered into the cavity. A fold-out camp pad lay across the grid. Next to it, an empty water bottle, a sleeve of granola bars, a paperback creased to the middle, and a phone cord run toward a junction box. No weapons, no tagging, just the outline of a place someone had tried to make into a night. "How long?" Sydney asked, not accusatory, fact-gathering. "A while," he said. "Couple weeks. Not every night he kept his eyes on the floor. I come after close. Leave before open. I clean up. I don't take anything." "Roof access?" Jorge asked. "Service ladder by mechanicals," the boy said, then winced. It was open sometimes. It had been left just enough for a vendor during late freight. Just enough is an invitation. EMS arrived with soft voices and bright gloves. They checked vitals, asked about guardians. The answers were clipped. First name only. School a district over. Mom not picking up. No dad. He sat still for the cuff and flinched only when the alcohol wipe hit a scrape. Police showed with palms visible. No cuffs. They asked to see the camp pad, nodded without commentary, and made calls. "You're not under arrest," one officer said. "We're finding you something safer." While forms moved, we did the quiet chores next to emergencies. Swept tile dust, taped the danger zone, updated the incident log. Corporate would want dates, times, actions, corrective measures. Safety would want pictures of access points and a tidy lessons learned. "What did you eat?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked embarrassed. "Stuff from home." Then I didn't have a home. There's a vending machine near the break room sometimes. I had cash at first. He'd learned which tiles creaked, which duck span would hold, how to lie flat when the motion sensor blinked. He'd watched us without malice, like a neighbor who doesn't knock. He liked the vacuum lines the floor scrubber left, said they looked like water raked by wind. He knew our hours by heart. EMS cleared him for transport. The officers outlined options: family, shelter, a school liaison. He folded his hand so tight his knuckles went pale. "I'm sorry about the tile," he said again, to everyone and no one. After they left, the building seemed to exhale. We rehung the grid, installed a new tile, zip-tied the service ladder. The roof hatch got a new hasp and an audit log. We added a line to nightly checks. Ladder down, hatch secure, motion sensors tested, tiles clipped. That could have been the end. The fix, the email, but stories have burrs. For days, I caught myself looking up like the ceiling might breathe. The scrape of a ladder sounded like a cough. The thin whisper of HVAC tightened my shoulders, not because I feared he'd return, but because now I knew the building had held a life in its hollow bones. Rumors stayed small. No intruder headlines, just kid. On the break room whiteboard, someone drew a ceiling tile with cartoon eyes, then erased it and wrote, "Check your ladders." We kept the jokes small and the doors closed. Corporate's email arrived 3 days later. Acknowledge event, don't share PII, secure access, retrain overnight, add signage. The bullets made the night look clean. The night was human. A week later, a counselor from the district stopped by with cards, resources for unaccompanied youth, training dates, a hotline to tape near the time clock. She asked what we'd heard above the ceilings, literal and not. We told her the practical things, the ladder, the hatch, motion blips at 1:53 and 4:08, the way granola leaves crumbs even when you're careful. On my last remodel shift, I walked the racetrack before open, past D12 where the new tile sat too white. Ordinary morning noises returned. Barista steam, inbound beeps, the hydraulic yawn of the doors cycling for team members. I stood under the tile and looked up until my neck hurt. An aisle runner asked if I needed a ladder. "No," I said, "just checking the ceiling." People think horror is knives and night. Sometimes it's discovering a space you think you control has edges you don't, and someone mapped those edges while you slept. It's the flex of a tile and a kid's voice saying, "Hold on," and the relief when the ending isn't a headline. It's a new checklist, a hasp that clicks, and the hush after the doors open, a building pretending to be simple while you learn to look up. We left the plastic sheeting up one extra night in D12, not because dust drifted, but because it felt right to give the store a curtain to breathe behind. The next morning, guests shopped home storage like nothing had happened. That's the goal, and the dissonance. I still walk that aisle with my eyes up. I still hear that scratch when the air kicks on. And when the motion sensor blinks, I picture a camp pad above a grid, a paperback face down on a beam, and a kid who learned our hours by light through ceiling squares. Closing shifts turn a target into a bright rectangle in a dark field. The last 15 minutes feel like a held breath. Sabrina ran self-check that night. By 9:15, drawers were counted and the doors set to one way. Outside, late summer humidity made sound carry. She'd parked past the second cart corral and asked asset protection for an escort, policy and instinct. Sydney from AP met her at the vestibule with a radio. "2 out," she said on Channel 1. Black lot, south side. They stepped into the lot. Light pools didn't quite touch. 3 lanes out, a dark SUV sat with headlights off. It rolled forward as they did, then stopped. People wait in cars all the time, Sabrina told herself. But when they paused, it paused. "See it?" Sydney asked, not looking. Sabrina nodded. "Center line," Sydney said. "If it moves again, we pivot back. No heroics." 20 yards on, the SUV drifted into the next lane and matched their pace with its lights still off. Sydney keyed the radio. "AP to front. Eyes on a dark SUV, no lights, south side. Keep doors manned. A cart attendant pushing a train of red carts caught the line of sight and stopped near the vestibule. "You want me here?" he asked over headset. Sydney said yes. Numbers deter. They pivoted and walked back in. The SUV idled a beat, then slipped 2 rows deeper and went nose out, like a fisherman changing casts. "Maybe it's nothing," Sabrina said, cheeks hot. "Maybe," Sydney said. "And maybe not." She suggested they wait 5. When they stepped out again, the SUV had migrated to the end of Sabrina's row, angled to force any car pulling out to pass within arm's length of the driver's window. Its lights flicked on for 2 seconds, flash off, like a test. "Plan B," Sydney said. "We bring the car to us." She called the opening manager, who rolled his sedan to the curb. "Keys," she told Sabrina. "Remote start if you have it. If not, you're in the back seat and I'm driving." We skip the row. Sabrina's Corolla blinked when she unlocked it from the vestibule. The SUV's hood dipped like the driver tapped the brake. Sydney took that as an answer. "Front, ring 911, she said quietly. "Suspicious vehicle? Lights off repositioning? Escort requested." The cart attendant flanked them with a short line of carts like a movable fence. They crossed as a unit to the manager's sedan. The SUV crept forward 2 spaces, keeping the angle. The driver's window was down, no face, just a square of darker dark. They didn't take the bait. Sydney loaded Sabrina into the back seat and pulled out. The SUV rolled too, not close, just a courteous distance, lights still off. Sydney looped toward the gas station where there were more cameras and people. The SUV followed long enough to be counted, then peeled off to the far exit and idled there. "Plate," Sydney said. The cart attendant read it out like a SKU, 3 letters, 3 numbers. Sydney repeated it into the radio so AP could mark the timeline. The SUV eased onto the road and vanished. A patrol car turned in moments later, blue lights washing the lot. Police took statements and walked Sabrina to her car, while a second unit did slow laps. The plate came back not to a dark SUV but to a compact sedan registered 2 counties over. Stolen, likely swapped. "We've had complaints about a vehicle like this at other retail centers," an officer said. "Same behavior, lights off, repositioning, lingering by cart corrals." He didn't say the word they were circling. He didn't have to. AP saved the camera clips, entrance angle, reposition points, the brake tap when the Corolla blinked. The opening manager put fresh, "We're happy to walk you to your car" cards at guest services. Small things, but small things add up. Sabrina sat in her Corolla a minute with the doors locked, willing her hands to stop shaking. The manager idled 1 aisle over to shadow her to the exit. She did what they teach, straight to a public place with lights. She chose the gas station, then home by the main road, no shortcuts. Her mirrors stayed empty. The emptiness felt loud. The next day, leadership ran a 5-minute parking lot huddle. They made it muscle memory. Escorts offered, radios charged, 2-person walks to the far rows, managers with cars staged by the curb at close. AP added a lot sweep call at 10 and 0 after dark. Someone notes anything that doesn't fit. Windows down in winter, no plates, cars that move when you move. Guests noticed. A woman with a stroller accepted an escort and said, "I wish more places did this." A college kid said no at first, and then fell into step when the doors opened and the night hit his face. People aren't brave or not. They're situational. So are parking lots. A week later, police called with a pattern. Similar reports from 2 other big box lots in a strip mall 30 minutes away. No assaults on camera, no stops that stuck. The plate was always wrong by the time anyone got behind the wheel. "If you see it again, call right away," the officer said. Sydney said they would. She added the plate to a whiteboard in the AP office with a note, "Check first. Plates may be swapped." Sabrina kept working closes. Fear didn't quit her job for her. It sat beside her like a passenger and got quieter when procedures got louder. She parked closer. She asked first, not last. She kept her keys in her hand and made eye contact with other team members on the walk out like passing torches. The story didn't improve with retelling. It didn't need a chase. What stuck was the moment in the lit desert when a shape matched her pace, and then stopped when she stopped. Horror isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's the click of a power window rolling down with nothing inside the frame but a square of deeper dark. 2 months later, it rained, polishing the lot into a mirror. Sydney stood by the curb with her radio and nodded at each person who asked for a walk. Sabrina passed with her backpack zipped and her keys tucked against her palm. They didn't talk about the SUV. They walked the center line and kept their eyes up. Procedures don't make you brave. They make you ready. Overnight resets give the store a sharp kind of quiet. No music, no PA, just tape guns snapping and a ladder squeaking down the racetrack. Around 12:40 a.m., we were building a patio end cap when Marco pointed up. "Is that a balloon?" Not one, dozens. Metallic silver shapes floated near the rafters, snagged on conduit and the cages around the sprinklers. Every one had the same wide-eyed alien face drawn in marker, big oval eyes, thin-line mouth. Some bobbed gently. Others clung to the ceiling like they'd been ironed there by static. None of us had seen them an hour earlier. Sydney, from Asset Protection, stepped into Seasonal, looked up and said, "Kill this zone." Nothing under those until we check sprinkler clearance. We pulled product back and coned the aisle. Then came the question we couldn't answer. How did they get here? AP rolled back cameras. No guest came in with armfuls of balloons. No vendor pushed a cart through receiving. The party aisle counts matched yesterday's on hands. If someone bought them, registers didn't know. If someone filled them, it didn't happen at our cage. We set the 12-foot ladder. The highest were still out of reach, so we used a duster pole to snag strings and pull them down. Each time a balloon slipped lower, it squealed against the metal guard, an airy scrape that hit your spine. Pinch the valve, and a hiss answered. It was helium, but the sound shaped like a word you couldn't catch. Up close, the sameness got stranger. The faces were nearly identical. Same oval eyes, uneven mouth, marker bleed. Knots were thin, clear fishing line, not ribbon. Ends were heat-sealed, clean like a vendor's tool, not kitchen scissors. While we worked, odd glitches rippled through the floor. Self-check screens flickered when clusters drifted past, like static crawling over glass. The EAS gates meeped twice with nobody walking through. "The helium cage is locked," the manager said, checking the tie and gauge. The vendor sign-in showed no after-hours entries. Receiving had been closed since 10. The only explanation left was the one nobody liked. Someone brought them filled and let them go inside. Facilities extended the scissor lift and took 6 stuck to the sprinkler cages with slow, careful peels that popped static. The final balloon scraped metal and hissed a longer note, the drawn mouth seeming to flatten as the face sagged. "It's just air," Marco said, mostly to himself. A P kept scrubbing video. At 12:02, the motion sensor over cosmetics flashed and a lone silver blur drifted across the frame. At 12:05, 3 floated above home storage, riding an invisible current. At 12:11, the camera over seasonal washed white for 2 seconds, static or breath, and when it cleared, a cluster hung where there had been none. No arm, no ladder, no hand. Balloons don't haunt. Blind spots do. We staged the bagged balloons in receiving to deflate. Mylar is stubborn. You slide a coffee stir stick into the valve and press while smoothing the film. Some hissed for minutes, faces shrinking from grin to slack as air left. We labeled the contractor bag like evidence for the incident report. By 3 a.m., the floor was clear. The feeling wasn't. Facilities walked the roof, vent caps tight, garden gates chained, loading dock weather strip intact. In the vestibule brush, Sydney found a 2-inch piece of monofilament like the strings we'd cut. She bagged that too. We opened late. The sign on the door said, "Maintenance delay." Guests still asked. The manager kept it simple. We had to remove items that got into the ceiling. Internally, we filed to district, potential prank, unknown entry, sprinkler clearance risk, electronics interference observed, area sanitized. 2 days later, a cashier found one behind the cart corral, half deflated, face still grinning on the floor. It must have slid past our sweep and lost height overnight. The knot matched, heat-sealed bite, fishing line tail. Back to the bag it went. The lessons were immediate. Party got a camera angled higher. The helium cage got a second tie and a log requiring 2 signatures after hours. Team members were reminded to escort any filled balloon straight to the door. A P added ceiling check to overnight walkthroughs. Because we're human, we started looking up more. A week later, the fire marshal came through on routine inspection. We told him the story. He tapped the sprinkler cage. "Mylar conducts," he said. "Get one across ahead and you can short a sensor and ruin a day." He'd seen a pharmacy lose freezer product because balloons tripped motion fields all night. Real world, not ghost story, still unnerving. What clings isn't danger so much as intent. Someone drew the same face over and over and tied the same invisible knots. Someone decided a store at midnight was the right place to let them go. Maybe a senior prank, a bored vendor, a video that never posted. We never saw footage. We never found the artist. What stayed was the shape those faces took in your peripheral vision for days after. Silver ovals lingering at the edge of light. Helium leaves crumbs. We picked Mylar shavings out of the scissor lift's rails all week. Tiny silver commas static glued to everything. We found one more string above the vestibule brush and added "cleans brush weekly" to the list. The commas stopped eventually. The checklist didn't. People asked if we were scared. Scared isn't the word. The store is built for certainty. Lights that obey, cameras that see, aisles that lead where you think. For an hour, a flock of cheap balloons made the cameras blink and turned the ceiling into a sky somebody else painted. It felt less haunted than rehearsed. We finished the end cap by 5, opened on time, and sold lanterns like nothing happened. Still, when the music is off and the PA is quiet, I do the new circuit, sprinkler cage, rafters, grid, listening for the soft hiss a knot makes when you let the air out. It isn't a voice. It's pressure leaving a problem. We never figured out who did it. The report closed with unknown party. The fix was the point. Escorts on balloons, higher cameras, second tie on the cage, a habit of glancing up. People think horror is blood. Sometimes it's a row of identical faces drifting at the edge of a fluorescent halo. and the way your hands learn a new shape of caution in a place you thought you already knew. When I lock seasonal now, I look up, not out. The roof holds, the sprinklers sleep, the aisles keep their lines. That's enough. Until a silver oval rides an invisible current and tests what you think you control. Then you do what we did. Pull it down, let it whisper, bag it, log it, and keep moving.